Just imagine for a second that everything you believe about angels and demons is just the tip of a cosmic iceberg. That there are secrets buried deep within sacred scriptures, stories so disturbing they were deliberately erased from human memory. Let's dig up one of the most shocking and forgotten narratives from the Bible, the terrifying fate of the women who mated with fallen angels. Was what Archangel Michael did to them an act of divine justice or a tragedy that echoes to this very day? This isn't just some old story. It's a prophetic warning that hits home directly in our time. In the book of Enoch, one of humanity's oldest scriptures, we find a terrifying revelation about events that preceded the flood. 200 watchful angels, known as the Grigori, watched Earth from high above in the heavens when something unthinkable happened. They started to lust after the daughters of men, the mortal women walking the earth. This wasn't just a passing attraction, it was an obsession that grew like a consuming fire in their celestial hearts. Semjaza, the leader of these angels, realized he wasn't alone in his transgression. He gathered his companions and proposed something that had never even been considered in the history of the cosmos, abandoning their celestial posts to satisfy their carnal desires. But Semjaza was cunning and knew that such an act of rebellion couldn't be done individually. He needed to make sure everyone was equally committed, equally guilty. On Mount Hermon, a mountain that stands majestically between Lebanon and Israel, the 200 angels made a terrible oath. They swore by mutual curses that they would descend to earth and take wives from among the daughters of men. Each angel knew they were sealing their own fate, but desire had become stronger than obedience. They consciously chose rebellion against the Most High. This pact wasn't just an impulsive decision, it was the first major act of cosmic conspiracy against the divine order. Genesis 6:2 confirms this narrative. The sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. What started as desire turned into organized rebellion, and what was rebellion would become the greatest spiritual catastrophe Earth had ever witnessed. But have you ever wondered, what exactly did these angels see in mortal women that made them abandon celestial glory? When the angels descended to earth, they didn't come empty-handed. Each one brought with them celestial knowledge that should never have been shared with humanity. Azazel taught men the art of making swords, knives, and shields, introducing organized warfare to the world. Barakijal revealed the secrets of astrology, while Kokabel unveiled the mysteries of the constellations. But it was the knowledge taught to women that caused the deepest and most lasting corruption. The wives of the angels received teachings on witchcraft, enchantments, and potions. They learned the art of seduction through cosmetics, jewelry, and beautification techniques that ignited unrestrained passions. Semjaza taught about magical roots and plants, while other angels revealed secrets about dream interpretation and celestial signs. What was once human innocence transformed into dangerous knowledge that corrupted not only the wives, but the entire surrounding society. Corruption spread like a spiritual plague. The women who possessed this forbidden knowledge became figures of power and influence, but also of destruction. They used their new powers to manipulate, seduce, and control, spreading occult practices that drew humanity away from God. The Book of Enoch describes how the whole earth was corrupted through these teachings, creating a society where the sacred and the profane mixed in a blasphemous way. But the real tragedy wasn't just in the knowledge shared, it was in what these forbidden unions would spawn. The wives of the angels began to conceive children who were neither human nor angel, but something completely new and terrifying. These hybrid beings grew supernaturally, developing strength and stature that defied natural laws. Earth was about to witness the birth of a race that would terrorize humanity for generations. But what really happened when these hybrid children were born? The horror that followed surpassed all expectations. The children born from the union between angels and mortal women were known as Nephilim, a word meaning the fallen ones, or those who cause others to fall. These weren't ordinary children. They grew with supernatural speed, reaching gigantic heights and developing strength no human could match. Genesis 6:4 describes them as the heroes of old, men of renown, but that renown was built on terror and domination. The Nephilim had insatiable appetites that quickly became a curse upon humanity. They consumed all the resources men produced, grains, livestock, and eventually, when food became scarce, they started devouring human beings themselves. The Book of Enoch relates that these giants devoured all the acquisitions of men, and when there was nothing left to consume, they turned against men to devour them. Earth became a place of horror where humanity lived in constant terror. But the destruction caused by the Nephilim went beyond physical violence. They established kingdoms of tyranny where they ruled through fear and oppression. Their mothers, the wives of the angels, became queens and priestesses of pagan cults, using their supernatural knowledge to maintain control over entire populations. Temples were erected where human sacrifices became common practices, and occult rituals further corrupted human spirituality. Violence spread like an epidemic. The Nephilim didn't just kill for food, but for pleasure and domination. They taught men the art of war on a scale never seen before, creating armies that devastated entire cities. Earth, which once knew only the peace of Eden, now echoed with war cries and the lamentations of widows. God's creation was being systematically destroyed by these hybrid beings that shouldn't have existed. But God wouldn't remain silent in the face of such abomination. The judgment that was coming would be as terrible as the crimes that provoked it. The earth's cry went up to the throne of the Most High like a desperate scream for justice. God saw that the wickedness of humankind was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil all the time. Genesis 6:5. But this wasn't just regular human wickedness. It was a supernatural corruption that threatened to completely wipe out the lineage through which the Messiah was supposed to come. Humanity's very salvation was on the line. The Lord summoned his archangels to carry out an unprecedented judgment. Michael, the commander of the heavenly armies, received a specific and terrifying mission: destroy the offspring of the fallen angels and punish those who corrupted the earth. Gabriel was tasked with warning Noah about the coming flood, while Raphael was to bind Azazel and cast him into the darkness. Uriel was given the job of alerting Noah about the impending destruction. Each archangel had a crucial role in the divine plan of purification. The divine order for Michael was clear and relentless: go against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication. Destroy the children of fornication and the children of the watchers among men. Make them go forth. Send them against each other, so they may destroy themselves in battle. There would be no mercy for the Nephilim, as they represented an abomination that couldn't be allowed to exist. Their own mothers, the wives of the angels, would also face terrible consequences for their part in the corruption. But Michael's judgment wouldn't be limited to just the Nephilim. The women who united with the fallen angels, who received forbidden knowledge and used it to corrupt humanity, would also face specific and terrifying fates. Some would be transformed to serve as eternal warnings, others would wander as tormented spirits, and those who showed repentance would receive a peculiar form of mercy that would be both a blessing and a curse. What Michael did to these women was so impactful, it forever changed the fabric of spiritual reality. Archangel Michael carried out specific judgments on the wives of the fallen angels, and each fate was determined by the degree of their involvement in the corruption and their response to the divine call for repentance. Those who refused to abandon their occult practices and kept spreading forbidden knowledge faced the most dramatic transformation. They were lifted into the heavens and turned into constellations, condemned to shine eternally as silent warnings of the consequences of rebellion. Their lights in the night sky serve as perpetual reminders that even beauty can mask divine judgment. The wives who actively participated in violence and human sacrifices received an even more terrifying fate. Michael turned them into wandering spirits, condemned to roam the earth without rest, without a physical body, but retaining awareness of their condition. They became the first restless souls in history, entities that haunt places where great tragedies occurred, especially locations where their Nephilim children caused destruction. These tormented spirits constantly seek bodies to possess, trying to experience again the physical sensations they lost. But Michael showed a peculiar form of mercy to those wives who, upon seeing the monstrosity of their children and the destruction they caused, genuinely repented. To these, he offered a terrible choice. They could have their memories completely erased and return to normal mortal life, but they would forever carry an inexplicable sadness in their souls. They would live seemingly normal lives, but would always feel a deep emptiness, a melancholy they couldn't understand or heal. These forgotten women became the ancestors of specific lineages that still carry a peculiar spiritual mark today. Their descendants often experience prophetic dreams, intense spiritual visions, and an inexplicable attraction to both the sacred and the occult. They are simultaneously more susceptible to spiritual influence and more capable of spiritual discernment. Michael created through this complex mercy a lineage that would serve as a bridge between the natural and supernatural worlds in future generations. But the judgment of the Nephilim held even greater horrors, whose consequences haunt our reality to this very day. The war against the Nephilim was unlike any conflict Earth had ever witnessed. Michael didn't just lead angelic armies, he orchestrated a systematic extermination campaign that used both supernatural forces and strategies that made the giants turn on each other. The Book of Enoch describes how Michael made them go forth and sent them against each other, so they would destroy themselves in battle, creating a civil war among the Nephilim that accelerated their own destruction. Their supernatural forces, which once terrorized humanity, now turned against their own brethren. The physical extermination of the Nephilim was just the beginning of a much more complex and terrifying judgment. When their gigantic bodies fell on the battlefields, something unforeseen happened. Their spirits didn't find the rest that usually comes with death. Because they were hybrids of angels and humans, they didn't have a designated place in the spiritual realm. They weren't human enough to await final judgment, nor angelic enough to return to the heavens. They became homeless entities, condemned to wander eternally between worlds. These disembodied spirits of the Nephilim turned into what we know today as demons, not fallen angels, but something far worse. They retained the superior intelligence inherited from their angelic fathers, but also carried the corrupt nature and insatiable appetites that characterize them in life. Without physical bodies to satisfy their desires, they developed a desperate hunger for possession, constantly seeking to inhabit human bodies, to experience physical sensations again, and exert power over the material world. The strategy of these Nephilim spirits became more sophisticated over time. They learned to work in organized hierarchies, establishing spiritual territories and influencing entire cultures through possession, oppression, and deception. Unlike the original fallen angels who were imprisoned, these hybrid spirits remained free to torment humanity. They became the principalities and powers mentioned by Paul in Ephesians 6:12, creating a continuous spiritual war that would shape all subsequent human history. But Michael knew that simple destruction wouldn't be enough. He needed to protect future generations from knowledge that could destroy them. After the destruction of the Nephilim and the judgment of their mothers, Michael faced a prophetic dilemma: how to protect future generations from the dangerous knowledge that had corrupted the antediluvian world. The solution he implemented was as ingenious as it was merciful. a veil of forgetfulness that would cover humanity's collective memory, transforming real historical events into myths, legends, and fantastical stories. This veil didn't completely erase the truth, but it distorted it enough so that future generations couldn't easily reconstruct the forbidden knowledge. The veil worked on multiple layers of human consciousness. First, it altered temporal perception, making events that lasted centuries seem like instant tales of heroes and monsters. Second, it fragmented memories, scattering different aspects of the truth across geographically separated cultures. The Greeks remembered the Titans, the Norse, the Jotuns, the Hindus, the Asuras, but no single culture retained the complete story. Third, it introduced fantastical elements that would make people doubt the historical reality of these events. But the veil wasn't just protection, it was also prophecy. Michael created it with a divine expiration date, programmed to gradually unravel in the last days before Christ's return. Scriptures would begin to be rediscovered, ancient texts like the Book of Enoch would resurface, and humanity would gradually regain memory of what truly happened. This progressive revelation would serve as one of the signs of the end times, alerting the faithful to the proximity of the final judgment. The veil also created an interesting division within humanity. Those whose lineages were untouched by the antediluvian events would naturally remain skeptical about supernatural realities, while the descendants of the angels' wives would maintain heightened spiritual sensitivity. The latter would be more likely to see through the veil, experiencing visions, prophetic dreams, and spiritual encounters that others would consider impossible. Michael had essentially created two humanities, one protected by ignorance, the other marked by ancestral remembrance. But the spiritual war was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The physical destruction of the Nephilim didn't end the conflict. It merely shifted it to an invisible battlefield that extends to the present day. The disembodied spirits of the giants, now operating as demons, developed sophisticated strategies to continue their war against humanity and against the divine plan. They discovered that, although they could no longer physically manifest as their gigantic bodies once did, they could exert influence through possession, spiritual oppression, and the manipulation of human systems of power and knowledge. The guardian angels, led by Michael, established a permanent counteroffensive that operates across multiple dimensions of reality. Every human being receives angelic protection, but the descendants of the angels' wives' lineages face more intense and targeted attacks. These individuals often experience more severe spiritual battles, but also receive stronger angelic protection and more pronounced spiritual gifts. They have unintentionally become frontline soldiers in a war that most of humanity doesn't even realize exists. The strategy of these Nephilim spirits evolved to focus on corrupting systems and institutions rather than isolated individuals. They work to infiltrate governments, educational systems, media, and even religious organizations, promoting ideologies that draw humanity away from God and reintroduce forbidden knowledge in new forms. Modern technology, the exploration of occultism through entertainment, and the normalization of practices once considered abominations are all manifestations of this ongoing spiritual war. But Michael and his angels are not passive in this battle. They constantly work to awaken humanity's spiritual consciousness, inspiring preachers, prophets, and ordinary individuals to proclaim the truth. They orchestrate divine coincidences that lead people to the spiritual resources they need, protect those who are fulfilling divine purposes, and gradually remove the veil of forgetfulness to prepare humanity for the final events. The war is real, it's intense, and you're in the middle of it, whether you realize it or not. Ancient scriptures, especially the Book of Enoch, contain specific prophecies about the last days that align perfectly with the events we are witnessing today. The prophecy declares that before Christ's return, the veil of forgetfulness would begin to unravel, gradually revealing the truth about the antediluvian events. We are seeing exactly that happen. Ancient texts being discovered, renewed interest in books like Enoch, and a growing awareness of spiritual realities that have been hidden for millennia. The prophecy also reveals that the descendants of the angels' wives' lineages will face a final choice in the last days. They will be confronted with a clear decision between fully embracing their spiritual heritage to serve God or succumbing to ancestral influences that pull them toward occultism and rebellion. This choice will not be subtle. It will be a dramatic and definitive decision that will determine not only their eternal destiny, but also their role in the final events of human history. Michael, according to prophecy, will return with full authority to execute the final judgment. This time there will be no veil to protect humanity from the complete spiritual reality. Everyone will see the angels, everyone will witness the spiritual war that has always existed, and everyone will face a final choice between light and darkness. The spirits of the Nephilim who have wandered the earth for millennia will finally be definitively imprisoned, and those who chose to serve them will share their eternal destiny. But the prophecy also contains extraordinary hope for those who choose correctly. The lineages that were marked by ancestral tragedy will be completely redeemed and will receive special roles in the eternal kingdom. Their unique experiences with spiritual warfare will qualify them for positions of authority and responsibility in the new heaven and new earth. What was destined for destruction will be transformed into glory, and what was used by the enemy to cause pain will become a source of eternal strength and wisdom. The story we just uncovered isn't just some old tale about distant events. It's a prophetic map that shows exactly where we are on God's timeline and what's coming next. The fate of the fallen angels' wives serves as a solemn warning about the consequences of spiritual choices, but also as a promise that even the deepest tragedies can be redeemed by God's transforming power. If this message hit you deep, hit that like button on this video as an act of faith and to acknowledge the truth that's been revealed. In the comments, I want you to declare your faith and where you stand in this spiritual war. Write, I trust in God's transforming power. This isn't just a phrase, it's a prophetic declaration that breaks ancestral curses and establishes your covenant with the kingdom of heaven. When you declare this publicly, you're taking the right side in this ancient battle and letting others see God's power working through your testimony. Your declaration might be exactly what someone needs to read to make the most important decision of their life. Subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon because the revelations we're digging up from the sacred scriptures are getting more and more impactful. We're living in the last days, and you need to be spiritually ready for what's coming. This channel was raised up by God to awaken a generation that understands the times and knows how to act. You can't miss any of these revelations that can save not just your life, but the lives of your family and descendants. And if the tragic fate of these women hit you hard, you need to check out another shocking story that not many Christians know about. In the card above and in the description, you'll find our video, Discover the Only Name Banned from the Book of Life, the story of a revelation about the only man in the Bible whose name was completely erased from the heavenly records. This story will shake up your convictions about divine justice and show that some sins are so serious they can lead to irreversible, eternal condemnation. Watch now and get ready for another truth that will change your spiritual perspective forever.